Hey everybody, and welcome to the Fat Bike Show. Thank you very much for joining me. It's episode 6. Hopefully you've watched the other episodes. You haven't? Well, it's probably best you go back and watch them then, isn't it? I'll wait. See, there's a bit of me thinking, I wonder how long I could actually stand here before you start tapping the fast forward. Anyway, let's get on with it. So what's coming up in this episode? Well, I'm going to share the latest news about the show. We've got Fat Biking for Dummies, how to choose your first fat bike. We have the Skill Wheel, which is a new feature that I hate, but my friend is making me do it. We also have Shop Talk with our friend Sam at Bikemonger. I'm going to do a quick recap of some of my favourite rides and favourite bits of 2020. And what else? Oh, we've got a continuation of our feature called Trail Heroes, and this is where I share with you some of the people in our community who go the extra mile, give something back, and I'd like to acknowledge them. So that's the show, so let's get on with it. So what news of the Fat Bike Show? Well, we continue to go from strength to strength in terms of views and subscribers, etc. So thank you so much. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, maybe you have a personal grudge against them, and you can share it, I'd be very grateful. Done some upgrades on the bike since the last show. I shared with you my brand new wheels, which I'm liking more and more. That's in episode 5. But not all upgrades are great. I was reading online, people talking about how a slacker head angle could improve your riding, so I gave it a go. If anything, truth be told, I think it made my riding worse and I kept crashing into stuff, so that's not necessarily something I'd recommend. And isn't technology great? Isn't Facebook great? They know everything about you, don't they? They know absolutely everything about you. This week I've had the same advert come up in my personal news feed probably 7 or 8 times. It's this one. Now, 3 things are wrong with this. Generally, I prefer brunettes. She's not riding a fat bike. In fact, she's not even riding a mountain bike. And it's called Sophia Dates for meeting beautiful girls from the Ukraine. Top tip, internet blaggers. Sofia is the capital of Bulgaria. It's not even in Ukraine. So, better luck next time. So welcome to Fat Biking for Dummies, and this is how to choose your first fat bike. And you're probably thinking, why didn't he cover this in episode 1? I forgot all about it. I just assumed everyone was as cool as me riding a fat bike, but that's okay. So here's a little video about what I think you should be thinking about when you're buying your first fat bike. And it comes down to 3 things. It comes down to your finance. It comes down to the activity you're going to do on your fat bike, and it comes down to the surface that, it comes down to the terrain that you're going to ride on. So let's have a quick look at each of those. So the first thing, like it or not, is probably going to be finance when you're buying your bike. So 2 things. 1, who cares how much you spend on a bike? You buy whichever bike you can afford and whichever bike makes you happy, but it will determine the features of the bike, whether it's suspension, etc. It will also determine how light the bike is, maybe the material the bike's made out of. But, and I would stress this, there are some terrific entry level, as they call them, fat bikes, even if they're second-hand, etc. In the UK, they don't make them anymore. There was a, Halfords is one of our bike shops. They did a Voodoo brand. It was called a Voodoo fat bike. It was my first fat bike. Wonderful bit of kit. You can still pick them up for £300 or £400 with very little wear and tear. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. But when you're searching, do what anyone should do when they're buying a bike. Work out exactly what your budget is and then go over it. It's also very important when you're thinking about buying a fat bike is to consider what activity you're going to do with it. Is it extreme mountain biking? Are you bike packing, which will determine the weight or the strength of the bike you need? Is it for cool urban riding like this guy's doing? That will determine the sort of bike. So be very clear in your mind and be realistic. If you might go to a bike park once a year, but 99.9% of your riding is canal paths, etc., bear that in mind when you're making your choice. And the third thing is terrain. And this is really important because it will determine some of the features your bike needs to have. Now, if you're going to do long trails through beautiful, crisp snow, you probably want the lightest bike you can afford. You know, not that extra weight. However, if you're in a rocky area, you might want suspension. If you're going to be doing drops or jumps, that will also be a big factor. So really think about not necessarily how far you're going to ride or why you're going to ride, but where you're going to ride. Okay, so those are the three things I think you should have really pretty clear in your mind before you start spending any money. But there are also three types of bike you can have. So let's go outside and I'll give you a quick run through. So if you're looking at buying a fat bike, you effectively have three options. And the first is a rigid frame, and it's called a rigid frame because there's absolutely no suspension built into it whatsoever. The idea is that the sheer size of the tyre and the volume of the air run at a low PSI gives you some element of suspension and helps you roll very effectively over pretty much anything. Your next option is something called a hardtail. Well, it is in the UK because there's no suspension at the back or the tail end, if you were. That bit's hard, but you do have front suspension forks. Some bikes are sold as new as hardtails, whereas others you can buy them as a rigid bike and then add the fork yourself. This gives you the flexibility to choose between different styles of forks. If you're riding on terrain that's a bit more challenging and you'd like a little bit more comfort or to absorb some of the hits at the front of the bike, then a hardtail could be the bike for you. And the third kind of fat bike is one called a full suspension fat bike. As we had with the hardtail, you have suspension forks up front, but we also have a rear shock. This is the kind of setup you normally see on an all-terrain or enduro mountain bike, and you don't often see them on fat bikes, but it really does give you the opportunity to go anywhere and do anything. But of course, you're going to have to pay for the privilege, and with more suspension, it normally means more cost. Okay, so there we go. So I would strongly recommend, don't be a dummy. Consider those three things when looking for what fat bike you want to buy, and then go and start exploring whittling it down. There isn't the same amount of choice there is with mountain bikes, but that will change as our sport grows and grows and grows. Look on eBay, look for secondhand, join some Facebook groups, interact with people. There are still lots of big name brands making fat bikes in the UK, in the US, etc., in Germany. In the UK, we've even got Smokestone Bikes, which is a pal of mine who makes some wonderful bikes. So really do your research, check your options and get some feedback. We're a wonderful community and everyone will help if they can. Okay, now time for a new feature, and I'm folding my arms like this because it's a stupid feature and I don't want to do it. But my friend says I have to. Every week he goes, you should do a skills video about how to learn and do so and so. And the reason I don't want to do this, or I haven't done it so far, is because I am useless. I can't do these fundamental skills, and it's not through lack of trying. I have tried, tried doing a wheelie until my back hurt, and I've tried, but I lost a bet with him, so I have to do this. So this is the new feature. So we have, look up here, I'm just checking down here. So a front wheel lift to get over a large obstacle, can't do that, never done that. A track stand, probably the easiest one, nope. Offer me £1,000,000, I couldn't do it now. We've got the front wheel pivot, so when you're going down a really tight corner, apparently you put the brake on your front wheel and you flip the back, you pivot on the front wheel. I can't do that. And we've got a wheelie, which, hey, I'm 50, I've probably been trying for as long as I've been mountain biking, and I'm useless. But I did let him, or I did encourage him to put in another one, which is trail dog training, which effectively is just me going out on the bike and taking Gwen with me. So those are the options. Now, what I'm going to do is, there's another channel I featured in my other show called Roxy's Ride and Inspire. Roxy is a mountain bike coach in Mallorca, does great videos, and she does a video for each of these topics, apart from taking Gwen for a walk. So, I haven't seen this. He's going to spin the wheel, press the button, spin the wheel, and whatever it lands on, I have to do by following one of Roxy's videos and do it for the next show in 2 weeks' time. So, let's spin the wheel. Okay, it's... do you know what? It's probably the easiest one on. Is it the easiest one on there? No, maybe it isn't. That it is. I've got to try and do a track stand. So I will do that in the video. I've got 2 weeks to do this. Roxy, I know, has 2 or 3 videos on this, so I'm going to follow that. That way, if I can't do it, I can share some of the blame and shame with her. Righty-ho, again, this time we're going to include a segment of someone who actually knows what they're talking about, which I think breaks up the programme quite nicely. This is Shop Talk with Sam at Bikemonger.
Hello Richard, hello everyone. We've been talking about winter for a few weeks, but now looks like it's finally here. So today we're going to talk a little bit about winter maintenance for your fat bike and the kind of things you need to do to keep yourself rolling through the winter. Whereas in the summer you can get by with just blowing the dust off and lubing your chain every once in a while. Well, at least that's what they say. You UK mountain bikers can stop laughing at the back there. But in winter your bike needs a bit more TLC. Cleaning obviously isn't rocket science, it's just brushes, warm soapy water and elbow grease. The challenge here is really psychological rather than technical. While you're cleaning, it's an ideal time to just inspect your frame for damage or anything that's happened to it while you've been out. Concentrate on high stress areas, so the chain stays, seat stays, bottom bracket area and round the head tube. You know, a lot of these places are you're not looking at them when you're riding, particularly if they're underneath a layer of snow or mud, so you can look for chips, cracks, any damage to carbon fibre frames and so on. Also, while you're cleaning, it's worth you can quickly check your brake pads. They wear out surprisingly quickly in winter. And then wipe everything down, quick squirt of lube, 10 minutes, and if that's all you do on a regular basis, that should keep most things going through the winter. However, even with all this DLC, there's no getting away from the fact that winter is harder on your bike than summer riding. So bearings, cables, brake pads, all these things take much more of a beating in the winter. So every so often it's worth having a bit more of a comprehensive maintenance session. So really most of this process is checking things, it's just checking for wear and maybe a slightly more thorough version of the cleaning process we were describing before. So again, check your brake pads. Probably worth taking them out and actually having a look at them. As I said, they wear down surprisingly quickly in winter. And while you've got them out, give them a rub down. Just rub the braking surface on a flat piece of sandpaper. Gets rid of any glazing or accumulated crud. You can check spoke tensions on your wheels. Check cables for wear. Check your tyres, check your tyre pressure, particularly important for fat bikes which are going to be running at low pressure and also likely to be tubeless. Tyre sealant doesn't perform as well in particularly cold conditions, so it's always worth checking your tyres haven't been losing pressure unduly. Checking chain wear is also a good idea. Changing your chain regularly is actually a much more cost-effective way than waiting till it's completely worn out. A worn chain will wear out other expensive components like cogs and chain rings much faster. So checking and changing your chain regularly is better value in the long run. If you've got a chain checker like one of these, then it's a 10-second job to check the chain wear. Only cost a few quid, and definitely worth it. Bearings as well suffer a lot in winter in all that mud and grit and salt, especially things like outboard bottom bracket bearings, where they're directly in the path of all the filth thrown up from the trail. So check your headsets, your hubs, and the other thing, your bottom bracket, for any sign of play, any feelings of roughness. If you're feeling really keen, you can pull the bearings out and give them a fresh coat of grease. If you've got a suspension bike, then obviously check the pivot bearings for any play. You can also check the seals. Again, they work less well in cold weather because the rubber tends to harden. Top tip: if you in cold weather you want to dial back your compression and rebound damping. Suspension fluid becomes more viscous when it's cold. So it reduces the danger of your forks or your shock packing down. Presented in a great big list like that, it sounds like an awful lot, but it's really not. If you get into a routine, if everything's set up for you to do it, it's not so bad. As I say, little and often is the key. Much better to do 10 minutes a week than it is to do nothing and then a big service every 6 months. Okay, that's about it for today. Next time we'll look at a few more ways you can kit your fat bike out for winter riding. But until then, get out there and enjoy the snow. And it's back to Richard.
Although 2020 was a horrible and ridiculous year for most people, for a huge amount of people, I managed to get in some great riding. So I'm going to have a very quick look back on some of the fun I had in 2020 on my fat bike. Let's have a quick look.
Welcome to Wales. What a great trail. You are going to go further than this, aren't you?
So what's coming up in 2021? Well, firstly, I've got to allow my friend on his e-bike a rematch of our race. I'm also going to try and get my fat bike over 40 miles an hour going downhill off-road. The show after that will be from the hospital. I'm going to take up some of the kind offers I've had from people I've met via the show to go and ride with them, restrictions permitting. And I also want to make sure that 2021 we continue to spread a bit of positivity and a bit of love in the fat bike and mountain bike community. Even e-bikers. I didn't mean that. Calm yourself. Good evening. This is a public service announcement regarding e-bikes. If you ride an e-bike, that's okay. It doesn't matter why you ride an e-bike. You might be old, you might be infirm, you might just be incredibly lazy. It is no concern of anyone's apart from your own, as long as you want to ride it and you can afford to ride it. If you don't ride an e-bike, please do not get really angry about other people who ride e-bikes. There are lots of things we should get angry about. Man's inhumanity to man, poverty, that boyfriend and or girlfriend who dumped you. Those are things you can get mad about. If someone writes on the internet they have an e-bike or they like e-bikes, you are not compelled to add a comment saying how much you hate them and or e-bikes. Thanks very much for watching. Now it's time for Trail Heroes, and the heroes this time are Peak District MTB. This is a very well organised advocacy group to support mountain biking in the Peak District National Park. They are a super bunch of guys who are supporting the interests of mountain bikers, maintaining and developing trails. And one of the things they do, I've just been through all their website, their videos, etc., is rather than having an us versus them attitude, they work really hard to create partnerships with other groups in the local area. It's too easy when you're trying to promote your activity to see someone else's activity as an enemy, but actually we should all work in partnership. One thing I would say, I'm going to give you the links, please go and check them out. You don't have to live there to support them, or just give them a thumbs up or put a comment saying, you know, good work guys. So they are by a mile the trail heroes this episode. So that's it for this episode. Thank you to Sam at Bikemonger. Thank you to the continuing support of fatbikeclub, our sponsor. They are going from strength to strength. I think their channel had 1 million views last month. So please go and check them out. If you can, subscribe, that would be wonderful, and share the video, I'd be very grateful. And I'll see you next time when I'm going to scientifically prove you get more smiles per mile on a fat bike. Thanks for watching.